what I'm doing today is kind of experimenting on making roux with cornstarch. Now, many people have been asking what are the different things that you can use to substitute for flour, because so many people are having problems with the gluten, eating foods with gluten. So the question is, can you use cornstarch? Well, yes, you can use cornstarch to make roux, but the process is different than making the basic roux, and the characteristics of the roux will be different. So the process for making the roux with cornstarch is, and I'm going to show you right now, I've put 2 tablespoons of oil in a skillet, and I just like using cast iron skillets, but you can use any kind of skillet. So I've got 2 tablespoons of oil. Now I'm using canola oil, but you can use most any kind. You can use butter. And I'm heating it. And what I'm going to do is take 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, one tablespoon of cornstarch. My box is getting kind of low. I'm taking 1 tablespoon of the cornstarch, and I had a cup of water here. Well, I've poured 1/4 cup of water into a container, and I'm going to add the cornstarch to that 1/4 cup and stir it up. And then you take the other 3/4 of the oil, pardon me, of the water, and pour into the oil. Pour it slowly so it won't boil over on you. And so we stirred the 1 tablespoon of cornstarch into the 1/4 cup of water. And now we're going to add this slowly while we're stirring to the other 3/4 cup of water and the 2 tablespoons of oil. And as that heats, it's going to thicken. And we're going to have what's known as a slurry that we can then put into our recipe, our chicken or shrimp or other seafood casserole or dish to thicken it. Now, this is not your traditional roux by any means. So that was very fast and easy to do, but you can add this to your recipe as a thickener. So the process was different. If we were making the traditional roux, we would have just used the 2 tablespoons of oil and 2 tablespoons, equal parts, oil and flour, and stirred those together and cooked them on a low heat until it browned to the color that you wanted to use for your recipe. If you're making a shrimp dish or some casseroles, you don't want them to have a dark color. So you could use this as the thickener. But if you were using flour, you would not have to cook it very long to make your roux. Some dishes you would want a blonde or a little bit darker, not real light, but kind of a medium brown color. But if you're making a New Orleans style dish like gumbo, then you want your roux very dark. What you have to do is catch it just before it burns, and that's the color that you want, a deep, deep brown, mahogany color. So the way you make the roux is different using cornstarch, and the different characteristics are that it's a lighter color. The advantages is that it's quicker, and there's no color change to affect your finished product, and there's no strong flavor that's going to possibly overpower what you're cooking, and less of it is needed because the ratio of the regular roux made with flour is equal parts oil and flour, but with the cornstarch you use half as much cornstarch as you do the oil. So, but the disadvantages of using the cornstarch, one is you can't make it ahead of time. It won't keep in the refrigerator. It doesn't brown, so it's not going to give you that rich brown flavor that you get with the regular roux. And there's really no taste, or not much taste to it. So in order to get that roux flavor that you're used to in gravies and gumbos especially, then you have to have that chemical reaction that happens when you make regular roux. It's a reaction between the proteins in the oil and the well, actually there's proteins in the flour also, proteins and your sugars as they're reducing. Then that creates the brown color and the rich nutty flavor. You can use the cornstarch in place of making a regular roux with flour, but it changes the entire finished product. So I still say no, not really. You can't. If you're making a traditional gumbo, then you couldn't use the cornstarch for that because you wouldn't get your flavor unless you could find some sort of seasoning that would give you that flavor. And I'm just not sure what that would be. But there are some very good alternatives to using regular flour. And there's about 5 really good ones. You could use rice flour. Arrowroot is a fantastic, gives you a really good roux. So that's a really good replacement. Your oat flour is good, potato flour, and then there's an all-purpose gluten-free flour that's a combination of several different kinds of flours. So I would say that you probably couldn't replace the flour in gumbo or most gravies, dark gravies, with cornstarch, but you certainly can use it for many things, many different types of recipes. You could use the slurry, the cornstarch slurry in. So just for the fun of it, what actually would happen if you try to just substitute cornstarch for the flour using the traditional method of making a roux. So I've got 2 tablespoons of oil in the skillet, and I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of cornstarch to it. And we're going to stir it up and see what happens. Just as we would the flour, if we were using flour to make this roux. I'm afraid this is not working at all. It's just kind of lumping up. Just kind of making a mess is what it's doing. So we know that this method, using cornstarch, definitely doesn't work. So your best bet is to just make the slurry and use in other recipes. And use one of the other alternatives for flour besides cornstarch. And if you're making gumbo or dark gravies. If you found this video to be helpful, please like and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by.